So I want to welcome you tonight, and I just want to tell you how much all of your support of our programs means to me and to everybody here. You know, we take your support as seriously as we take Gustav Stickley's vision for Craftsman Farms. It means a lot to us. And so this is the time when we send out the letters asking for money, and if you're considering giving to us, I hope you know how much your support means to us. Tonight I was getting those lanterns ready that light the walkway, and I was thinking about how if Stickley was doing this, he would think of it as something symbolic and would write about it in the Craftsman and make it poetic. It would be lovely, and I can't really do that. But I wanted to say, I was kind of inspired to say, you know, I think that some of our sincerest people who are most sincere about arts and crafts are here with us tonight. And we want to share in Stickley's vision with you, and we want to light the path for others to find it as well, and also for the next generation. So, I mean that. Light the path together. I hope that you'll join us in doing that. And speaking of lighting the path, I don't think anyone lit the path better than our guest speaker tonight, Bruce Johnson. So he's set the example for all of us with this. I want to tell you a little bit about him. Bruce is a recognized authority in the do-it-yourself community. He is the official spokesperson for the Minwax Corporation. And I think in that capacity he's been traveling a lot the last few days, so we're really glad you've carved out some time to be with us tonight. He has written numerous magazine articles. He wrote a column for 2 decades that appeared in 20 different magazines. He has written more than a dozen books, including the book that I was just talking about. It's a beautiful book about the furniture at the Grove Park Inn. He has frequently appeared on television. He has 2 shows right now on the Do-It-Yourself Network. I just found out I have this network. I'm going to DVR your show. That's exciting. So build your own log cabin and do-it-yourself woodworking. And he started out as a high school English teacher, then opened his own antique restoration and repair shop, and then went back into writing. And happily for all of us, he then was founded and currently directs the Arts and Crafts Conference at the Grove Park Inn, which is an extraordinary experience. If you haven't done it, please drive down to, or fly down to North Carolina and experience it. And many of you have already, know what I'm talking about. It attracts more than 1,500 arts and crafts collectors every year. And Bruce, we're so glad that you're here tonight. So I'm just going to turn the program over to you, and I hope you'll help me welcome him.
I think you wax very poetic.
Oh, very good. Well, I've been reading a lot of the Craftsman.
Midwives poet.
First, I want to thank you for coming out on such a dreary night. But when I was looking at the weather forecast a couple days ago, I was thinking, we won't even be here tonight. The Weather Channel and Al Roker were having a great time predicting the number of feet of snow that we're going to be getting. So, and it's always my pleasure to come back up here, and I've always promised Heather that anytime I was anywhere in the neighborhood that I would give you as much advance notice as possible, which in this case was less than 2 weeks, I think. It was terrible. But I just found out I was going up to Boston to film an episode of This Old House yesterday. Took the segment, when it airs sometime in the spring, will last a total of 6.5 minutes. Took us 3.5 hours. And it wasn't because I wasn't doing a good job. It was just because we had one of those directors who would say, that was perfect. Now can you do it just a little faster? And it was, so it was a typical day up there, but it was great. So, and then I was headed down here today to do a training session with the marketing department at Minwax, which is just up the road. And Minwax, you know, goes way back with arts with the Craftsman Farms, and we're going to be working on Minwax to see if we can't get them a little bit more closely associated with Craftsman Farms. They actually purchased and donated the kitchen cabinets many, many years ago, and they've got a whole new set of people over there. But you know, they're just up the road here, and with all of our connections, they should be more deeply involved here. So my early New Year's resolution is to be working on the powers that be at Minwax. Of course, they might suggest that I just, you know, they fire me and take my money and give it to Craftsman Farms. So don't know how far you can push sometimes like that. So I was there working with them today, had tonight off, and then I'm driving up to Hartford tonight to do a TV show up there tomorrow morning. And then, but I hear it's just nothing but fog and rain, no snow, right?
Right.
Right.
That won't be a problem. Won't be a problem. So, I'm a collector, and it's kind of funny. I've been going. I think a lot about the different stages that collectors go through as I was putting together this talk, which is a very informal talk. If you're looking for footnotes and references, you're not going to find it here because I leave those for the wonderful collection of books we have back there. I just love collecting. I love talking about collecting, and so I thought, well, it's a perfect thing to come and talk to this group about. And I have to pay homage to my grandmother. This is Violet Gebhardt Hickok, no longer with us, but Grandma Hickok, to her 10 grandchildren, was such a strong influence on me early on. I'm a real believer that collecting skips generations. I have 2 sons, one age 17 who is making applications to college, one who is 21 who's making applications to grad school. The word retirement doesn't ever come up in our conversations. When they look at my collections, they see dollar signs. They don't see like, oh, what are you going to keep? It's like, folks, 3 days after my funeral will be the best sale. Go to Asheville, these guys will be selling this stuff dirt cheap. Because they don't have, I don't know, maybe it's because they're growing up with it. My parents are not collectors. I really do believe it goes every other generation. Maybe we rebel too much against what our parents forced us to live with, that we have to do something completely different. So my grandmother would take me up to yard sales in Galesburg, Illinois, and she would pull up out front driving this brand new Chrysler. She and my grandfather were farmers. And my grandfather, I don't think, ever borrowed money for anything. But he was a vain man in 2 respects. He always wanted to have a new Chrysler and a new cowboy hat, which both he wore quite proudly. And Grandma and I would go to yard sales, and so she got me hooked as a collector, and it was with stamps and coins and baseball cards and whatever. And so I grew up as a collector, and then they're my sons at a much younger age. And they had to put up with my collecting because I had this old caravan that when we lived in Asheville, and I grew up in Illinois and Iowa, and then moved to North Carolina about 20 years ago. There wasn't a lot of arts and crafts in North Carolina when I moved there, but nobody wanted what was there. And so I literally was driving around the countryside, buying up everything that was brown and ugly, and then just driving it home to see if it was anything. And one day on a Saturday morning, the boys were loaded up in the caravan, and I was bribing them. I promised I would take them to McDonald's if they would go with me to this auction, where there was a piece of stickley being offered that morning. So that was all right. So we did that. We went to the auction. I don't even remember whether or not we got the piece. But what I do remember is we were in the car, and what I hadn't told them was there's just one more auction that had another piece of stickley in it, 2 in the same day. So we're driving down the road, and they suddenly figured out we weren't yet going to McDonald's. And this voice from the back seat says, "Dad, you don't have to own every piece of stickley." Little did he know he was wrong. I thought I did back then. But they've been great about it. My collecting, when I got old enough to move from baseball cards and coins and stamps as a pre-teenager and teenager, I got hooked on golden oak. And I loved golden oak. And this is what I collected. And I think I realized that for the most part it was garbage. But I still loved it. And later, I mean, this is sort of like gold. I mean, this is the stuff I love going after. But, you know, what little things I didn't realize at the time was, you know, these carvings were machine carvings that were glued or tacked on. The hardware was stamped from very thin sheets of brass. There was a lot of involved here. And it was just, but it was Illinois, it was Iowa, there was golden oak everywhere. And this is what I sought after. This is what I like to collect. But then one of the questions that I often have gotten over the years is, well, what was the first piece of arts and crafts furniture? What broke me out of the golden oak search? And some of you may have heard me tell the story, because occasionally my wife tells me that I too often tell the same stories over and over again. I'm sure it's a sign of not a good thing. But years ago, when I was still a Golden Oak collector, and I had an antique restoration shop in Iowa City, after having taught high school seniors for 5 years, I needed to do something different. And so I started an antique restoration shop. And one day I got a phone call from a Mrs. Ben Somerville to come out and look at some walnut and mahogany pieces she wanted refinished. And I looked at them, they were upstairs, and she said, by the way, would you consider trading for the work? And I said, well, what do you got in mind? We went downstairs to the basement. And she didn't have 2 of these, she had 12 of them.
Oh, wow.
They were in a row. I remember walking down that basement. I could walk to that house today. I could walk down that basement. There those 12 Roycroft chairs were, right down. They looked like 12 Lutheran deacons sitting there sternly looking at me. I was in love. I mean, I just thought, this is it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what that mark meant. Didn't know anything about it. But I was done collecting Golden Oak. It was all over. And the search began. My second piece of arts and crafts, a piece of Gustav Stickling. Very ordinary, but one of my favorite rocking chairs. And this piece was being offered at the Iowa City Art Museum at a fundraiser, a silent auction. And this, what had happened was the director of the art museum had talked a friend of his who owned this rocking chair into putting the rocking chair in the silent auction so they can make a big deal about it, which they did. But unfortunately, 1980, Iowa City, who cared about Gustav Stickling rocker? Well, the guy who owned it didn't want to give it up. But the deal that they'd worked out was that he would buy it back. But yet they would get it for the publicity. So I show up and I see this there. Original leather seat, leather, original tacks, original finish, sign, sitting there. And I was just dumbfounded. It was like, there's a Gustav Stickling rocking chair. My first piece of Gustav Stickling. And I go up and I kind of glance at the paper, and this guy, the guy who owns the chair, and I kind of figured that out by listening to him whispering over there, had put down a bid of like, let's say $200. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't very much. But I just knew, I smelled a rat. I knew there's something going on. So next to it, here's the rocking chair, and here's a piece of garbage. I have no idea what it was. But suddenly I got very interested in this piece, next to the Stickling rocker. And so I went up, and as I'm looking at it, I'm just studying this thing. My heart is pounding, my throat is dry. I want to turn it over and upside down, but I thought, no, I can't get interested here. So during the course of the cocktail hour, they trying to get everybody drunk and getting the bids up and this sort of thing, I put in a few fake bids at the piece next to it. But no bids on that one. Left it alone. Nobody bid on it all night. Whatever the opening bid was, that's what it was. And then they did the countdown, as they do at all silent auctions. And you got down, they did the 10, 9, 8. And, you know, let's say the rocking chair's over there. Well, the owner and the art museum director are standing over here, just kind of keep an eye on it. But they've got a little lax because nobody else has bid on it all night. They don't know me from anybody. So, you know, and I'm up here, you know, kind of looking at the piece next to it. Got my plan worked out. You can see what's coming. So they start the countdown. They get to 10 seconds, 9, 8, on down to 5, 4. And these guys are just standing back there and thinking, I got it figured out. I'm up here looking at it. They hit 3 seconds. I just took one step over, signed my name, upped this bid by $10. Boom, the gun went off, they froze the bids, and I got the chair. The guy was so mad. He was so mad. He wanted to buy it back. He didn't. He was mad at the director. He was mad at me. He wanted his rocking chair back. All's fair at auction. So I've hung on to it. Sentimental values all these years. Like I say, it's just a fun little piece.